Dragons. Old dragons, ice dragons, dead dragons. There are a ton of different dragons in Elden. And although most of them are just the same dragon with a different coat of paint, between them there are two that stand out from the rest. Placudisax, and now with a Shadow of the Earth Tree DLC, Bayle. And because of their similarities, there's been a ton of discussion about them fighting each other and who would win. But what I want to find out today by comparing them is who is truly the best dragon boss in Elden Ring. And the first comparison point we use is what we see immediately, their design. In the lore, Bayle and placudisax fought and heavily wounded each other, and that is the main theme the game goes for, being injured dragons. With placudisax missing 3 heads and Bayle missing everything. But between the two of them, Bayle loses the injured dragon theme a bit better, since in the fight, Bayle actually acts like he's heavily injured, being kinda hunched over because of his missing leg, using this bone that's sticking out of his wing as a weapon, and his big phase 2 power up being him using magic to bring his wings back. Stuff like this makes his design and gameplay work really well together and makes the whole theme of him being injured felt really well throughout the fight. While placudisax is just kind of missing heads and that's about it. His attacks and gameplay don't really do anything interesting with his missing heads, and you don't really get the feeling that he's injured through his gameplay. So because of Bayle's gameplay and design being a bit more in tune together, Bayle ends up winning design by a pretty big margin. But now let's go into the next category, visuals. One thing Bayle and placudisax share except being injured dragons is one of the defining features being amazing spectacles and visuals. Placudisax was the king of spectacle in the base game, but let's see if Bayle can take his crown. Starting with their entrances, and Bayle is not off to a good start. Placudisax has this menacing entrance of him floating in the sky with thunder striking as he walks slowly towards him, while Bayle just kinda glides in like a basic dragon would. It's kind of weird how not unique Bayle's entrance is, but let's get into what's actually important. The attack visuals. Bayle's main attack theme is fire breath that attacks to red and Michael Bay explosions for every single attack, and also some weird backflips. But his main 2 huge spectacle attacks are his phase 2 transition of him magically growing his wings back, flying, throwing some lightning at you, then landing and causing about 50 explosions, and him using his bone arm as a nuclear bomb in phase 2. Now let's talk about placudisax's attacks. Placudisax's main visual theme is red lightning and weird cloud teleporting powers, with his 2 big attacks being him throwing a spear into the ground and nuking everything, and exploding fire lasers he ripped off from midair. And when comparing Bayle and placudisax, we see that the 2 nukes are essentially equal, and while Bayle's phase 2 transition is great, it's more or less equal to the midair lasers. Topping exploding fire lasers is pretty hard, so it ends up being between placudisax's normal attacks and Bayle's. And while Bayle has the advantage in phase 1 with his extra red fire looking better than placudisax's yellow fire, and explosions being equal to the lightning, but placudisax's phase 2 of disappearing, teleporting and flying everywhere, and his entrance being better makes him slightly edge out Bayle in the visual department, and he wins this category. The scores are now equal, and this next category will decide who is the best dragon, and it's probably the most important thing, gameplay. But before we get into that, like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video so far. Okay, now let's get back into gameplay. Let's start with placudisax. After walking for about 10 years to finally reach and hit him, the first thing you notice is that his health bar is gigantic. The second thing you notice is that placudisax spends 90% of phase 1 doing absolutely nothing, and just kind of letting you hit him. And even when he does attack, his red claw attacks are very easy to dodge, and his standing up fire breath attack straight up allows you to walk into and hit him without taking any damage. The only attack that possesses any real danger in phase 1 is his backward fire breath, which will only happen if you stick around his backside a bit too much. And overall, phase 1 is mostly him just standing there while you slowly poke away at his gigantic HP bar. Although his second phase does make it somewhat better by giving him the mobility of teleporting. So he stops waiting around for 5 years after each attack, but teleporting also has its own issues of not actually being able to see where the attack is coming from, and now instead of standing still and doing nothing like the first phase, in the second phase he moves around like he's done a ton of drugs. So his phase 2 ends up being him switching between the 2 extremes of not moving at all, or moving around way too much and not letting you hit him. And his final attack that he stole from midair is actually worse than midair's version. Midair's lasers have enormous damage and are very dangerous, but they have the drawback of stunning him for like 5 seconds and letting you hit his weak spot. And although placudisax takes the danger and the damage of the attack, he just does not take the drawback of it at all. He is completely fine after using it. Overall, placudisax somewhat disappoints in the gameplay department. But now let's move on to Bayle. Bayle is an extremely aggressive boss, relentlessly attacking you to the point that when you start fighting him, it feels incredibly unfair. But once you spend some time learning him, you realize that as aggressive as he is, nearly all of his attacks are completely dodgeable and not really unfair in any way. And not only are they dodgeable, some of them allow you to sneak hits in where you wouldn't expect, like running into him just as he stops fire breathing and getting a hit in, or sneaking a roll attack on his bone slam. These extra sneaky hits don't seem like much, but they add more skill expression and engagement to the boss. But what makes you engage with the boss even more, Bayle does the exact same thing as Midir, ending most of his attacks with his head in front of you, encouraging you to fight him head on instead of hugging his tail. And the fight becomes this constant back and forth of aggression, with him constantly attacking you and you dodging and punishing everything he does, making for an extremely fun phase 1. And his phase 2 doesn't really degrade his quality either. Most of his phase 2 attacks are just expanded versions of his phase 1, like him doing his bone bomb twice instead of once. And the new attacks he adds mostly follow the same principle as phase 1, like being able to get a ton of hits on him by iframing through his nuke, which I'm pretty sure you could not do with placudisaxes. Bayle's fight only really has 3 issues. The biggest one is that the straight fire beam he does sometimes bounces off the ground and hits you when it really shouldn't. And the second being the camera, but this isn't really a Bayle thing, it's more of a FromSoft and not being able to do big bosses thing. And third being that some weapons like the iron balls really struggle hitting his head, but the only real big issue is the straight beam being buggy. So if I'm only really having one issue, he makes for an amazing fight. Oh, and I can't really make a video about Bayle without mentioning Egon. Egon's screaming is both really funny and also adds to the atmosphere of the fight. But what makes it even better is that most of the time Egon does absolutely nothing, except trying to kill air itself with dragon incantations. So Egon also makes Bayle just a tad bit better. But even without Egon, Bayle's fight is harder but also more fun and engaging than placudisaxes, making Bayle win this category by a large margin. And now, with all the categories done, let's move on to the final verdict. And by now it's obvious that I consider placudisax to be the best dragon. No, it's obviously Bayle. Bayle is an amazing fight and the best dragon in Elden Ring, and I would also consider him top 3 boss of Elden Ring in general. But what do you guys think? Is Bayle better than placudisax or is he worse? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and like and subscribe for more of this stuff.